I want to talk to you today about a pie safe. I can't even tell you when the first time I saw this pie safe was, because I think I probably saw it before I was noticing such things as pie safes. Let's say I was 20 years old or older, probably when I first saw it, and probably saw it and didn't even give it a second thought, didn't even notice it. But sometime after I was 20 years old, say probably around when I was 25 or 6 or thereabouts, and started attending auctions on a more regular basis than just occasionally. And when I was 27, I quit racing motorcycles and started doing a lot of different other things besides that, occupying most of my time and my spare time. I started appreciating antiques and liking them and starting to learn about them. And one day I noticed this pie safe, and even as inexperienced as I was at that time, when I did finally notice it, I recognized that I was looking at something special. And I didn't have enough experience to know really how unusual it was or how rare its form was. But I knew I hadn't seen anything like it up to that point in time. And I liked it, even though it wasn't the kind of thing that I started out being interested in as I gained an interest for antiques, especially antique furniture. It had a unique form to it and a unique shape. One of the things about it was it had two tin doors, pretty much typical of a 10-door pie safe, except the doors were a little taller and a little narrower than most pie safes were when they had two tin doors that opened from the sides, from the middle out, and were hinged on the sides. Most pie safes that were double-doored pie safes, that's the way they were, and the tins in them generally were rectangles, and they were put in the doors with the long dimension horizontal. That's not 100% true, but usually for a 10-door pie safe with two doors, that's going to catch the design of the door more than 80-85% of the time. The exception to that is when instead of having three tins, the doors only have two tins, and then so sometimes the door to be the height that they wanted it to be, the tins are turned, instead of horizontal, they're turned vertical a long ways this way, and that makes it possible to have a longer door. And the other example is when it's a single door pie safe, one like chimney cupboard size or shape, where it just had one door and it's a tall cupboard, and they call them chimney cupboards because a lot of times there was a chimney in the house that protruded out from the wall, and these cupboards sat next to them about the same depth as the chimney, and there's just a little niche there to set them. Those type of pie safes frequently have the tins turned the vertical way instead of the horizontal way. But this pie safe had the tins turned vertical even though it had two doors. In fact, it didn't have just two doors. It was like, instead of being double wide, it was like triple wide. And the one door was hinged on the outside of the safe, and then the door that opened from the middle with that door was hinged not on the other opposite outside, but on a upright or a post that was 2/3 of the way across the front of the pie safe. And then in the other third, there was another smaller, shorter paneled door that opened, and there were drawers the same width as that door that took up the rest of the space on that side of the pie safe. And this particular one had 3 drawers above that panel door and one smaller drawer below that panel drawer. It also had a drawer that same height on the bottom of the 2 tin doors. In other words, there was about a 4-inch high drawer, double width below the 2 tin doors. There was a 4-inch high drawer, single width below the panel door, and then above the panel door there were 2 drawers that were probably, I'm going to say, somewhere between 8 and 9 inches tall above that door. So that configuration, rather unusual in a pie safe. After I became aware of this pie safe and began to appreciate it and began to get more and more knowledge about such things, that just caused me to appreciate it more. I was talking to an antique dealer. His name's Doug Jenkins. And Doug's about 6 or 7 years younger than me. And I was a young man when I met Doug, and he was an even younger man. And as far as I know, Doug never really had a regular job where he might have, he might have had a job as a boy or when he was in high school, but I never knew him to have a job. He's been an antique dealer as long as I've ever known him. He started buying and selling antiques when he was a teenager, and to my knowledge, he's made his living ever since buying and selling antiques. And I'll give him this. The guy is a hard worker, and he has, he covers the ground, and pretty awesome the way over his lifetime he's managed to make his way in life by buying and selling antiques in the manner that he has. Anyway, I consider him a knowledgeable person about such things, and I was talking to him one time about the pie safe, and he said, "What you're describing to me, Luke, is what they call, most people call that a Bedford Pie Safe." He said, "I have heard it called a Lawrence County Pie Safe, but I think Bedford Pie Safe is the right term for that." And I said, why do they call it that? And he said, there was an individual in or near Bedford in the middle to late 1800s, maybe even into the early 1900s, who built pie safes of that form. And I think at the time that we had this conversation, he told me he had seen somewhere between 5 and 7 pie safes like this. And the one I was talking about, he hadn't seen, so I can't count in what he had seen. And when I asked him about it, I had seen one and a part of one. I called what I had seen 2, but it really wasn't 2. I had seen one, and then I had bought one, that really was only part of one. It was in such bad, it was the ultimate hard times purchase. That pie safe had seen horrendous hard times. What it was the two tall doors. There was probably between the two of them, you might have been able to get one door, but I don't think so. You might have been able to get 3/4 of one door from the two tall doors. The small panel door was falling apart, but I think it was all there. The drawers, and I'm not sure this one even had the bottom drawers. If it had them, they were gone when I bought the safe. This thing had been laying in an outbuilding with a dirt floor on its back, and rot and insects had eaten the entire back out of it, had eaten at least half of what were the sides of it. And it, as I remembered, it had solid board sides with like bootjack legs. But the sides were half gone. The top was mostly gone. The two bottom drawers were gone. The back half of the three regular drawers were gone. They had succumbed to insects and rot. But what was left was the front frame, which gave you the basis for what I'm talking about in that style of pie safe. You had that. You could have built the back on it. If I'd have known at the time what I know now, I probably would have tried to save the front of that thing and make the pieces to complete it again, and I would have made a pie safe out of it. But I didn't know that at the time, so I had a booth in an antique mall in Mitchell. In fact, it was called the Mitchell Antique Mall, and I put this particular piece of a pie safe that I'd found. I took the pieces of it apart. In fact, those drawers, I cut them off at about a 4 or 5 inch depth. I saved all that I could of what was left of them, put a back in them, and sold them as drawers. They had dovetailed joints in the corners. They had really good old chalk blue paint on the front. The drawers actually had most of the paint on them. The doors about half the paint, and the frame less than half the paint. But a really good old example of old paint. And I'd sold those drawers, and I got something like, I don't know, $10, $12, $15 a piece for those 3 drawers. And the door, the little door, I put it back together, and what I should have done was made a cabinet for it and put it on the cabinet, but I didn't. I sold it in my booth at Mitchell too. I think I probably got $10 for that door, and so I ended up getting $45 or $50 out of it, and I had those pie safe doors for several years, just over there in the barn, and I finally ended up making the Hard Times original using what was left of those doors. But I digress. I'll start out talking about the Bedford Pie Safe. That is the part of Bedford Pie Safe that I saw, or I owned. And then since then I've seen a third one, belonged to a lady named Lewis that lived over on 18th Street next to Dr. Fontaine. And after I bought this other one I began talking about, I heard about the Lewis ladies, and I went over, knocked on her door, and asked her if I could look at it. And she was really proud of it, took me in, showed it to me, and I asked her if it would be for sale, and she said no. And of course, I thanked her for letting me look at it. And her son, who's a couple years younger than me, or thereabouts, I knew him from the golf course. He heard that I'd been in his mother's house looking at that pie safe, and it irritated him. He called me up on the phone and said that pie safe wasn't for sale, for me to stay away from it. But anyway, that's a different story. There weren't any hard feelings over it, but he wanted to make no uncertain terms that pie safe wasn't for sale, that belonged to his mother. But what we're talking about is a Bedford Pie Safe. And those are the only ones I've ever seen. Now, I did hear of another one. I had another friend who was an antique dealer. His name was Richard Day. He's dead now. And he, upon hearing about the one that I had, actually, I didn't have it then. It still belonged to somebody else, but I knew about it, and I was telling him about it, and I was telling him about the conversation I had with Doug, and he said he knew what I was talking about, and he had seen one. In fact, he had an opportunity to try to buy one time, but didn't work out. He had gone to Martin County, he said, to an auction to try to buy one. When he started explaining to me where this auction was, I don't think he was in Martin County. I think he was still in Lawrence County. I think he was on Huron Williams Road. And he went to a sale, and the reason he went was to try to buy this pie safe, which was of this form. But he went to the sale with his brother-in-law. And I didn't even know his brother-in-law at the time he was telling me this. Actually, I knew him, but I didn't know his name, and I didn't know it was Richard's brother-in-law. Didn't put that all together until later. The man's name was Art Poling. He was from Jasper, and I knew him as the Rooster. That's another. It can't be another story now that I've said that. I'm going to have to tell you that story. Everett Green, who you may or may not have heard of, he was a premier antique dealer from Mitchell, Indiana, owned Log Cabin Antiques. Doug Jenkins, who you've heard of already in this story, and Art Poling were people who bought a lot of their merchandise at auctions. And when those three got in opposition with one another at an auction over a piece of furniture that they wanted, things got ugly. And so my father-in-law, he used to go to auctions with me sometimes, and he referred to them as Mr. Green, Ponytail, that's what he called Doug, Ponytail, and the Rooster. And so I always thought of Art Poling as the Rooster because that's the nickname my father-in-law gave him. Even after I knew his real name, when I thought of him, I thought of him as the Rooster. Because he was like he was a little red-headed guy, and he was like a banty rooster. I mean, he strutted around like he was ready for you, whatever you bring it, you know. That's the way it was at an auction. Well, he and Richard went to this auction together, and of course, Richard wasn't any match for the Rooster. The Rooster saw the pie safe, and he wanted it, and it went for a pretty good price, but nothing like a lot of those pie safes brought. And I said, Richard, why didn't you try to buy? He said, you know Art? And I said, no, I don't know Art. But after I did know who Art was, then I understood why Richard didn't try to buy it. He wasn't going to get it bought. All he's going to do is make his brother-in-law mad and run the price up. His brother-in-law was going to buy the pie safe. So those are the only ones I've ever heard of or seen, except, of course, Doug told me that he had seen several, and I think since then he's seen others. But anyway, that is what's known as the Bedford Pie Safe. The pie safe that I originally knew as Aunt Colleen's Pie Safe. And Aunt Colleen had, depending on how you counted, maybe 5 or 6 different pie safes. Some of the things people might call jelly cupboards that she would have called a pie safe. But she had more than one pie safe. But anytime anybody said Aunt Colleen's Pie Safe, you knew they were talking about that Bedford Pie Safe that belonged to Aunt Colleen. In the days leading up to auction day at Aunt Colleen's, and I believe Shannon told me that was in 1998. It doesn't seem that long ago, but Shannon should know because she bought Aunt Colleen's house after Aunt Colleen moved. (1998), prior to the auction, Betty and I discussed what we might be able to do or not do at the sale. And I've said this many times, if it weren't for Betty, I would either be a multi-millionaire or I would be absolutely broke and homeless, because she's always been the check and balance to my want-tos. If I had to guess, I'd be broke and homeless. But I always have big plans and big ideas and big ambitions, and she always brings me back to earth, or tries to keep me from getting carried away with myself and doing silly things. She wasn't always able to, but most of the time she did a pretty good job. At any rate, we had some discussions prior to Aunt Colleen's auction and talked about some of the things that I wanted and some of the things that we were going to try to do. And what it boiled down to is that the Aunt Colleen Pie Safe was the mission for the day. It was the #1 objective. We weren't broke and destitute, but we didn't have unlimited funds at that time. You know, we had obligations and debts and bills and a budget. So I couldn't just go to Aunt Colleen's sale and buy everything they sold. I would have liked to have done that. I think I've already said that somewhere in a video, that especially on the smalls, all the smalls that they had, and all the stories that Aunt Colleen could have added to those. I mean, a lot of that stuff I'd never seen before. It was in a drawer or in a box or in a closet or something at Aunt Colleen's house, and when they brought it out and had it in the backyard, it was the first time I'd ever seen some of it. And some of it was some pretty fabulous stuff if you like old things and antiques. But we decided that if we got off our feet, we're going to get off our feet because of the Bedford Pie Safe, the one we called the Aunt Colleen Pie Safe. There was one other piece of furniture there that I was really fond of, and I thought at the end of the day I would also own it. She had a baker's cabinet, that's what I'm going to call it. It was unusual. I'd never seen one like it, and I've never seen one like it since. The base of it was pretty typical for a baker's cabinet. The wood was maple. That in and of itself was kind of unusual. Most of those were ash or oak, or sometimes poplar, sometimes mixed wood. This one was, it was maple. The top and the bottom were both maple. The bottom was, like I said, pretty contemporary for a baker's cabinet. The top had um, a nearly oval opening in the side of it, in the wood. It was cut out, a hole cut out in the side of the wood, probably 2.5 feet long, 6 to 9 inches wide. Probably more like a Ford emblem than an oval, or than an oval. It was like more pointed on the ends than an oval, but unusual piece. Set in her kitchen for as long as I could remember, and I always was fond of it. I liked it. It was unusual, and but I didn't think it would be real popular with other people, and I really expected it to not bring very much money, and I thought I would own it too at the end of the day. As it turned out, that didn't happen. It brought a lot more money than I thought it would, and I wasn't able to buy it. The Pie Safe, when they got ready to sell it, because Becky Jenkins was there, Doug's wife. Doug was probably somewhere else that day buying other things, and Becky had been delegated to go to that sale. I knew that she would have an interest in it, and I thought she probably was going to, at the end of the day, own it. I thought she'd probably pay more for it than I would, even though I had sentimental attachment to it. I had no idea what someone might really pay for it, but I thought she was the one that I'd have to worry about. And the auction started. She started the bid on the thing, actually, I think, and it went for a ways before I got in, between her and a couple other people there. Maybe there was 4 of them. Finally, it got up to where the auction slowed down some, and I got in. And when I got in for a little while, it was just me and her. And finally, she quit, and I think she quit at about $9.50. And she may have been just trying to slow the auctioneer down and intended to get back in, but when she kind of got out, then another fella there, his name's Travis, he got in on it, and he and I then went on. I'm tempted to talk about Travis here and about Mr. Lehman, who was the husband of my great-grandmother, Toki. But I'm not going to do that. Some point in the future you'll hear me talk about Mr. Lehman, and he was Grandma Toki's second husband after her first husband died. I'll tell you a story about him in some auction when I'm talking about regrets, I think. Anyway, Travis and I, we locked horns for the rest of the day, and I can't, to be honest with you, I can't tell you for sure what I paid for Anthony's Pie Safe. I think it was above $1,400, but I wouldn't swear to it. It amazes me, one, that I can't remember that. Two, it bothers me a little bit that I can't remember that, because I could tell you what I paid for everything that I bought anywhere, where I bought it, what I paid for it, who bid against me for the last 5 years before that. Every auction I went to, and I was going to several hundred auctions a year, but can't do that anymore, and I can't even tell you for sure what I paid for Anthony's Pie Safe, although I think it was above $1,400. And I finally got it, and it was, I was happy to get it for that. And after I owned it, after the hammer fell and it was mine, probably 10 or 15 minutes after it had sold and they'd gone on selling other things, another man came to the sale. Guy I knew him too. He had a really nice place full of really nice antiques there in town. I think he's still alive. He's a year older than me. But he came to buy that Uncle Lee's Pie Safe. And when he found out that it already sold, he was dismayed. And when he found out I bought it, he came to me and he tried to buy it from me. And I said, no, Georgia, I don't want to sell it. It belonged to my aunt. It's what I came here for. And he started making me offers for it. And I said, I don't want to sell it. It belonged to my aunt. And I intended to buy it when I came, so why I came. And he finally ended up offering me more than double what I paid for it. And again, I can't even remember the figures there. It might have been triple what I paid for it. He made me an offer that was significantly more than I paid for it, and I thought I paid a lot of money for it. But I didn't sell it. And I was glad that he didn't get to the auction before it sold, because he was willing to pay what he offered me for it. He probably would have owned it. I wanted it really bad, but I can't imagine myself paying for it what he offered to pay me for it. So I owned it. Another thing that I bought that day that I hadn't necessarily planned on buying was another wallet piece, one that I originally bought. Aunt Colleen bought from me, or Uncle Virgil bought it from me, and then I bought it back at this auction. You'll hear about it in some other story, just about it, but I bought it there that day. And that's almost the end of the Aunt Colleen Pie Safe story. The Aunt Colleen Pie Safe story ends in our dining room. We got that thing home, we set it down in the dining room, there it was, mission accomplished. And from about that point on, that thing wasn't Aunt Colleen's Pie Safe anymore. What I considered, when I bought it, my pie safe, became Grandma Betty's Pie Safe. My wife changed the name of that pie safe, I think on the same day that we bought it, from Aunt Colleen's Pie Safe to Grandma Betty's Pie Safe. And I love her to pieces, and she loves me too. But she just, I think I've told you this many times, it's a premise of what the Hard Times Originals are. I'm a buyer and a seller, and I love buying stuff and I love selling stuff. And she just didn't trust that part of me that loves selling stuff to not sell that pie safe. I was never going to sell it, but just to make sure, she changed the name of it to Grandma Betty's Pie Safe. And all our kids and grandkids, that's what they refer to it as now, Grandma Betty's Pie Safe.